Well, we got a verdict in the Murdaugh trial just a few minutes after I finished recording yesterday's video. But I think it's good taking a day to think about it so I can condense my thoughts. I'm not surprised, unfortunately, that Murdaugh was found guilty. For those of us who watched the trial and went in with no preconceived bias, I'd never heard of Alex Murdaugh. I mean, I remember on the news, like back in 2021 when it happened, this whole thing about an attorney whose wife and son had been, had their brains blown out on his hunting property, and there had been a maid that had fallen down the stairs mysteriously there, and this was like back when it happened, June 2021. I heard about it on the radio, in like a bottom of the hour news update, and that was it. And then this trial came, and I went in pretty much unbiased. Now, there's always kind of a bias when someone is charged with murder. You tend to think, well, if there wasn't a good chance that they're guilty, they probably wouldn't have gotten an indictment, right? So there's always that basic bias. We kind of do look at people, and people can deny this. Jurors, I'm sure, deny it when they're on the stand. When they're up there for jury selection, they go, "Oh no, I have no problem, assuming this person's innocence until he's proven guilty." But the honest people like us understand that if someone's charged with a crime like that, you're biased towards thinking that they're guilty. Now, there could be some people who are just contrarians who feel the exact opposite, who are very good advocates for innocence until proven guilty, but those people are a small minority. And so as I listened to the trial, and I wasn't talking about it much on this channel, I think I've done 3 videos. I mean, it was a very long trial, 6 weeks. But I wasn't doing like daily updates or something like that. I'm not a lawyer. I don't really have that much to add on the law of it. But a basic summary of the case, and Nick Ricada actually gave a good summary of the case too on his channel, on his stream last night after the verdict. So you guys can go check out Nick. He streamed most of the trial live, so you can go and look at his archives if you want to watch the whole thing. I don't recommend it. It was excruciating. Very, very, very boring. But anyway, I think that most reasonable, unbiased people who watched that trial came away with the impression that the state basically had no direct evidence tying Alex Murdaugh to the murders. There was no evidence that put him there. There was no, blood that they could get off of him. There was, no signs of a struggle, like fingernail DNA type of thing. Like the wife didn't scratch him and get his, skin cells under her fingernails or anything like that. They don't have any bloody clothes, although they told a grand jury that they had bloody clothes. But that turned out to be a lie. It just wasn't true. And so all they have is pure circumstantial evidence that, he was there sometime before they were murdered, and then he finds them later murdered. And so in that time frame, they don't know of anyone else who was there. He's the last person who was known to have seen them alive. And so therefore, they're saying, well, he must be guilty. And so if you're going to buy into something like that, when there is no direct evidence that someone committed a crime, you're just saying, well, he's the last guy to see them both alive. You need a pretty strong motive. You got to at least say, well, this guy had he had reason to kill them. Not only is he suspicious because he's the last person who saw them alive and the person who discovered them dead, he needs to have some kind of motive to kill him. And everything that I saw, every individual who testified said that this guy was devoted to his family, that he loved his son and his wife. And as much as the Murdaugh hate brigade can say, oh, crocodile tears, he's an Oscar-winning performance. I mean, really, he's better than any actor I've seen at faking devastation over the loss of his family, if that's indeed what it is. You can say, oh, he's just a good actor. Okay. To me, that seems a little far-fetched. I think I'm decent at seeing through BS. His testimony on the stand about finding his family dead in the most gruesome way possible, by the way. It's not like they were poisoned. It's not like this was not a violent killing. You know, his son had his whole head exploded. Just like he didn't get a bullet to the head. He got an explosion of the head. His brains went everywhere. The wife appeared to be running away, I think, is the story that both sides agree on. You know, and she was shot a couple times, and once through the head with a completely different gun. Again, odd. If this guy murdered his family, why would he have 2 long guns to do it? You know, walking around with a 12-gauge shotgun and an AR seems a little far-fetched. But again, they had no murder weapons. Or I didn't say this yet. They had no murder weapons. They had guns there that they said to represent the murder weapons that Murdaugh owned that were the same calibers that were used to kill him. They had a 12-gauge shotgun there, and they had a 300 blackout AR. But they had no... These were not the murder weapons. They did not... The rifle was a little bit of a gray area. They said, well, based off of the markings on, I think, the shoulder of the brass, they said that could be the same. The gun, you know, the gun that was owned by Murdaugh, technically his son, but that was in the family. That gun could be the same as the gun that was used to shoot the wife. But they didn't they didn't look at all aspects of it. They didn't look at, and the defense pointed this out, they only looked at, I think it was the shoulder position. But they didn't look at the primer strike. And so the rifle may be the same rifle, or it may not be. But either way, both sides agree that the gun that was in evidence was not the murder weapon. There is some third gun out in the ether that in life was owned by the late Paul Murdaugh, the son that was killed, which is gone. Nobody knows where it is. If Alec knows the defendant, he didn't say. But either way, you know, he got a Fifth Amendment right. The state did not find it. They did not have it in evidence. So there was no murder weapon. Oh, and the shotgun, I think they said it was inconclusive, meaning it was not the same shotgun that was used to kill Paul Murdaugh. So they had no murder weapons. They had no bloody clothes. I can't emphasize enough. There was no direct evidence that Alec Murdaugh committed this crime at all. And all the testimony from all the witnesses that I saw said that he loved his family very much, and was, you know, a big family man. Would always, even when he was working, you know, would always answer the phone if one of his kids or his wife called. And so the prosecution came up with a bunch of vague hypotheticals as to why he might have killed his wife and his son. One reason was that, you know, he was a drug addict and they found his pills and they were going to take him away. And so he flew into a blind rage and killed them with 2 different weapons for some reason. Another reason was that, and this was what they pushed at the beginning, was that he owed a bunch of money because he was a fraud. He was a thief. He stole a bunch of money from clients over the years, and he had to produce discovery in a civil case, I believe. This might have been a different civil case, actually. There's a lot of cases pending related to Alexander Murdaugh. But anyway, there was one theory that if he, you know, his family was killed, he would get sympathy from the court, and he would get you know, a month break from having to produce discovery in a case. You know, it's like, okay, yeah, so to get a month break on this one court case, I'm gonna just kill my wife and son that, you know, that up until this point, you know, I was very loyal to and loved very much. You know, it's not like this. He was not like, you know, some kind of absentee dad who didn't care about his kids. You know, who wasn't a deadbeat. You know, who just showed up one day and said, you know, hey, you're my son, but I'm going to kill you. No, like, no, this was a, you know, child that he raised, you know, that he was involved in, and by all accounts was very loving towards. And then there was another theory for the motive was that the son was, you know, there was a civil case involving the son because the son was charged with DUI murder, and then there was a civil wrongful death case, I assume, and the plaintiff's lawyer was trying to sue not only the son because he didn't really have any assets, but also the father. You know, and it's a case of like bad parenting. Seemed like a BS lawsuit. I didn't think it probably wouldn't have gone anywhere. But anyway, they were saying, well, Murdaugh killed. Either he killed them to get sympathy in that case, so that no jury would, you know, award the plaintiffs any of his money because, you know, Paul had been killed, or he just killed Paul to make that case go away entirely because, you know, there'd be no one to sue then, or it was all a mess. I mean, the closing was terrible for the prosecution. They just said, well, Alec Murdaugh's house of cards was coming crashing down, his financial house of cards, you know, because he was stealing all this money for so long, and I guess he was on the verge of getting caught, or at least so they say. I'm not convinced of that, because he only really got caught after the murders happened. But let's just say that they're right. Okay, he was going to get caught. So the attitude is, oh, okay, I defrauded a bunch of people, and I'm going to lose a bunch of money. Guess I'll go kill my family. Right? There was no life insurance on either of these people. He gains no money by killing them. If he kills them, you have to assume, one, that he just doesn't care about them at all. He does not love them in any way. He's a total sociopath who does not value their lives at all, and that he just felt like killing them. That's what we're led to believe, and that's apparently what the jury bought into. And so this case is a total travesty. It is a miscarriage of justice. I have no problem saying that. I mean, it's not even close. This is not great. I mean, you can say, well, I think he killed him. Okay, but there's no evidence of that. I mean, I have no bias. I had no bias for or against the guy going into it. I had no reason to want him to be guilty. I just had to look at it, you know, because a lot of people are, you know, there's a lot of people who are taking the position of, well, I agree that the state didn't prove that he killed him, but, you know, I still think he did it. It's like, okay, well, other than what the state presented, I have no reason to believe this guy would kill his family. The default to me, if you're a father and a husband, the default position to me is that you probably love your family. And so given that, you have to give me some reason that either, you know, proof that he didn't care about his family at all, or two, that he had something to gain that was so substantial from killing them that he was willing to, that overpowered his love for his family. That he may have loved his family, but he loved money more or something like that. But he had nothing to gain from killing these two, and by all accounts, he was a loving father. So he has no motive, and there's no direct evidence that he did it. So as far as I'm concerned, the killer or killers in this case is still on the loose. The fact that two separate guns were used makes sense to me. Frankly, rifle barrels are made to pretty tight tolerances these days. I would not be surprised if the brass had a lot of similarities. And as incompetent as SLED, the state, I think it stands for State Law Enforcement Division, the state police, they're the South Carolina equivalent of the FBI. As incompetent as they've been proven to be, and as biased against Murdaugh because they're proven to be, you know, them positively IDing the rifle, I'm willing to write that off as just, I don't trust them because they're not trustworthy. They didn't even take fingerprints at the scene. And in addition to lying to the grand jury, there were a myriad of other issues with this law enforcement agency. And frankly, I don't trust cops, you know, on the surface either. Cops in court cases have a tendency to lie. That's just kind of what they do. So as far as I'm concerned, what makes the most sense is that two guys came onto the property, probably wanting to kill Paul Murdaugh, because apparently the Murdaugh family, very unpopular in their hometown. The wife was felt so uncomfortable in their hometown that she went to a different town to go grocery shopping. Paul Murdaugh, who was the one that was involved in DUI homicide, which he was never convicted of because he died. He, according to his older brother, Paul just couldn't walk around town. People would, harass him, pull over their car and yell at him. He was not welcome in their small town. And so it seems like a lot of people hated him. And by the way, Alec Murdaugh was hated for protecting his son, for protecting the son that was killed. That's why people hate Paul Murdaugh initially, because they say, well, he tried to cover up, his son's DUI homicide. He tried to corrupt and, fix witnesses. That's why they all think that Alec Murdaugh is such a bad guy. And so, does it make sense that, oh, okay, well, we think that he killed his son because he's such a bad guy, but the reason why you think he's a bad guy is because he supposedly was trying to protect his son? None of that makes sense to me. So, what makes more sense is that somebody, a vigilante, or a couple of them, who happen to have a 12-gauge and 300 blackout, not exactly uncommon calibers of long guns, they trespassed onto the Murdaugh's property. They saw Paul Murdaugh. They blew his brains out, and the mother happened to be close by and ran up to see what happened, so they killed her too, and then they left and never came back. There were no cameras here. There wasn't any sort of security equipment. They've got no evidence if anyone was there. The two people who saw them are dead, and so there's no reason why they should ever come forward or why they will ever be caught. Case is closed now that Murdaugh has been convicted. Nobody's going to look into this at all. So I'm not saying that that happened. I don't know that it happened. All I'm saying is that that's a more plausible story than the 5 different stories that the state came up with. And the fact that the state couldn't pick one narrative and stick to it tells me that they knew that they had no strong case in any direction. So they just threw a bunch of spaghetti at the wall to see what stuck. And so each juror could come up in their own mind with their own narrative as to why Paul Murdaugh is guilty. And they don't need to agree on why he's guilty as long as they all agree he's guilty. And so the folks of the state, they know he didn't do it. They know damn well. They're just bad people, as prosecutors tend to be. So, with that said, Murdaugh did a lot of bad things in his life. He was a thief. He was a fraud. But I've known fraudsters. I think I said this before. I've known people who have stolen money from their clients. And never for 1 second in my life has it occurred to me, hey, that fraudster, he might snap one day and just murder his family. Nope, that's never crossed my mind. You know why? Fraud and murder are very different crimes. Something that you are willing, being willing to steal from your clients and even from your own friends is very different from being willing to murder your family when you have nothing to gain. I mean, I guess, this guy wasn't a violent thief. He couldn't steal money to people, to their face, despite the prosecutors urging him to try and say that. They wanted him to say, you looked somebody in the eye and you stole their money. No, I don't think that happened. I think that Murdaugh was probably pretty cowardly and ashamed, and he just stole money wherever he had the opportunity to, and, when nobody would see. That's a very different personality from someone who's willing to walk up to someone, put a gun to their head, and blow their brains all over the ceiling. So, as one of the super chatters last night put it, on Good Logic stream, this is a modern-day South Carolina lynching. That's all it is. Now, it was through a court, sure, but this was a show trial. I guarantee you every single one of these jurors knew from the day that they sat down that they were going to convict this guy. They didn't need evidence. They don't like him. He's very unpopular in his town. So, if you try him, a jury of his peers is going to convict him of whatever the crime is. Because Alec Murdaugh's peers hate his guts, and they have reason, to hate him. He's not a good, upstanding citizen. He is a bad guy. But that's very different from being a murderer. You can be a very bad guy and still not completely eviscerate and perforate your wife and your child. And so, if anyone, and I'm sure this is, this is a pretty big case in America right now. If anybody, wants to strike up a conversation with them, you don't know a lot about it, just ask them, why is he guilty? Ask them what the evidence is. And you know what they're going to do? They're going to talk to you about a bunch of things that are not murder. They're going to tell you about how he stole a bunch of money. They're going to tell you about how he tried to fix witnesses in a DUI homicide case, the boat accident as it's known. They're going to tell you about that. They're going to say, well, he tried to cover up the boat accident. They're going to tell you, Bubba's got a cheekin', because he lied about where he last saw his family. He didn't lie about the timing. He lied about where it was. And it came out in court that he last saw his family at the scene of the crime, where they were killed. He never lied about what time he last saw them. He lied about where it was. He said it was at the house. Turns out he saw them down at what they call the kennels. I mean, I don't call it a kennel unless it's a place, unless it's like a business. To me, those dog pens. You got a big property like that, you got a bunch of dogs in cages. That's the dog pen. That's just what I call it. I don't call it the kennel. It sounds rather formal. But anyway, same difference. And he lied about that. So that's what they're going to tell you. They're going to say, well, he lied about being at the kennels because Bubba's got a cheekin'. His voice, for those of you who don't know, his voice was caught on in the background of a video. He wasn't seen, but you could hear him in the background say, Bubba's got a cheekin'. And they had a bunch of people who knew him get on the stand and identify him. They kept playing that clip over and over. Bubba's got a cheekin', and every single person said, yep, that's Alex's voice. So, okay, he lied about that. But telling a lie to a cop who lies right back to you does not make you a murderer. If lying made you a murderer, every single cop in that whole state would be a murderer. So you can't just tell me, okay, well, he lied and that makes him fishy. Okay, you can say he's fishy. There's no proof this guy did anything. And I don't think he did anything. He had no reason to. You can say he had some reason. Okay, well, if you need a pretty damn good reason if you're someone who openly loves your family as much as everyone says he did. There's got to be a pretty damn good reason to overcome all that to make you to make you so sick in the head that you're willing to kill your family. And you can say, well, he was a drug addict. It's like, okay, there's a lot of drug addicts in the world. They don't all always kill their families. Kill themselves a lot. In fact, Murdaugh tried to have himself killed, but I mean, he couldn't even put a gun to his own head. He had to have somebody else do it, and they didn't finish the job, and so that's the only reason he stood trial. I mean, he tried to have himself whacked, and that's the sort of thing you'd expect with a drug addict. Plenty of people who are drug addicts blow their brains out. Plenty of them steal. In fact, a lot of them steal from their families. Murdaugh doesn't appear to have done that. He only stole from friends and clients. And here's the thing. They didn't have to convict him on this if they just thought he should be put away in prison. He's going to probably spend the rest of his life in jail anyway for financial crimes. And so this is just to add insult to injury. This is just to put the label on him so that he dies knowing that he was convicted of his family's murder. And so that he knows till the day he dies that the real killers are out there free. He's going to be in prison no matter what. He had no reason, really, to even fight this charge. You know, he could have just pled guilty and moved on, because he's going to get convicted on everything else anyway. And for those of you wondering why I might be saying that, you know, isn't he going to mount a defense? Well, he had, in this trial, he admitted to every other bad thing that he's done. But the one bad thing he did not admit to is murdering his family. So I think he did a lot of bad stuff. He stole from people, but he should have to pay him back. And apparently a lot of those people have been made whole. Now, there's still a lot of damages and things, as the, you know, certainly his law partners and things, their firm was destroyed, their reputations sullied. Should he have to pay for all that? Yes, but he's not a murderer. I see no chance at this point. Listen, if there was a case to be made, the state of South Carolina would have made it. They made no case. They filibustered for, what, 5 weeks? Their closing was meandering. It was nonsensical. It was snore-inducing. And sadly, because he'll still have to appeal in South Carolina, it seems like the fix is in. He'll probably lose on appeal. This judge, for most of the trial, kind of just rubber stamped whatever the state wanted to bring in. I mean, frankly, there's a good argument that all of this financial crime stuff should have not even been brought up in this trial, because that's a completely separate trial. He was forced to, in this trial, admit to other crimes that he's committed that he had not been tried yet for. So, that completely screwed him in those trials, and he should not have had to really face anything to do with the financial crimes. And had they not, if this was a trial based solely on the evidence that Murdaugh committed this crime, and if he was put before an impartial jury, not a jury who every single one of them had heard of him and thinks he's a murderer, because there's not one person in this small town, in this county, who doesn't know who Alec Murdaugh is and doesn't know that everyone thinks he killed his wife and his son, that he was already a dirtbag before that. Every single citizen hates him. So, I mean, it is sad. I mean, could this happen to worse people? Does it happen to worse people? Yeah. There are people who are, actually really good, upstanding pillars of society who get railroaded by the injustice system and rot in prison. Alec Murdaugh's not one of them, but he still is innocent of this crime. Or at the very least, he's not guilty. So, with all that said, I don't know if I'll see you guys back here tomorrow. Tomorrow I got a lot to do, so I think I'm going to be pretty damn tired. I might not be back till Sunday. But anyway, I will see you folks then.